I've got some really bad news for feminists and for women in general. This is an article from 2017 called The Ambition Collision. And it talks about how millennial women are burned out, dejected, bored, want to move to the countryside, start a garden, raise a family. And it talks about how they were told their whole lives to strive for their careers, only to find that by the time they reached 30, there was nothing there. They then go on to make the grand presumption about why that is. And they say it's because men still control everything. No, I think that's a cop-out. I mean, the reality right now is the military-industrial complex is run by women. That's true. Look it up. The big Raytheon, Boeing, etc., Northrop Grumman, they're the CEOs. I guess the women at the top, the people at the top are women. So certainly women have reached positions of great power. Why is it that this article would write? It's written by women, mind you. Why would they write that so many women are finding nothing? Perhaps men and women want different things. Maybe it's fair to say that women shouldn't be chasing after a career working 80-hour weeks like men do. Or maybe that's not true either. Maybe it's true that women will never reach the pinnacle of career because men will always be there. And that's where things get kind of bad for women. See, here's a study. And these are older articles, mind you. This is from The Conversation. A study of 1.6 million grades shows little gender difference in math and science. And this is from last year. However, they do find the grades line up with the greater male variability hypothesis, which states, I'll give it to you in layman terms. Men are more likely to be stupid, but more likely to be smarter than women. And as we can see here, for those that are listening, I'll just describe it. It's two bell curves overlapping. We have female grades versus male grades. And lo and behold, this is very similar to IQ that we've seen. That there tends to be substantially more women of average intelligence, but there are more male morons and more male geniuses. This creates a particular problem for women. Yes, you can become successful in your career, but don't be surprised if the best of the best are the ones who end up running Fortune 500 companies. Don't be surprised when they will tend to be men and women won't ever reach those positions or tend not to. Let's read the story and I'll come back to this, but I'll give you the general, idea here. I've explained this before as it pertains to sports, but let's do it as it pertains to intelligence. Here we can see that in STEM, the variability hypothesis kind of overlaps exactly with the grades, with the results of tests. Let's say, when you look to the right, you have the geniuses. And there we can see that there are more male geniuses than female. But it looks like by only around maybe 20 or so percent. Okay, as we get higher and higher towards the end of the curve, it looks like it basically evens out. But I'll tell you this. If you have 100 people, 50 men and 50 women, and 20% of the geniuses you are more likely to have 20% more male geniuses than female. Let's say there's only 10 jobs available. You now have you've got 12 guys who are geniuses and 10 women who are geniuses, but only 10 jobs. It's likely that you will see more males at the top of the bracket because there are just more males, period. That doesn't mean those genius women can't go and start their own companies, but don't be surprised if most companies that succeed are run by men, and even if it's only by 20%. Let's go back to this story, and I want to read to you about how The Cut talks about women in their midlife crises. They say, what is this midlife crisis among the 30-year-olds I know? Millennial women, at least those who reside in professional bubbles, seem to have it all. They're better educated, more prosperous, less encumbered by cultural expectations than any previous generation of women. They delay marriage if they marry at all, and children if they choose to conceive. They can own or rent. They can save or spend. These women have been on familiar terms with their ambitions all their lives, raised by careful parents to aim high. Millennial women are likelier than their male peers to have professional jobs, to be managers, and to work in finance. But the people who run those and this makes sense. This makes absolute sense. Look at the data. Women are more likely to be managers, right? Because there are more women of average grade and intelligence than men, which means in the mid-tier of talent, you will find more women. And in the bottom tier, you will find more men. But at the top, the bosses are likely to be dudes. The data shows this. So yes, there's going to be a lot of women who are managers. They say, and tutored by their cultural icons to perform their empowerment and never submit. You know, bow down, B-word, as they say. So why are the well-employed, ambitious 30-year-olds of my acquaintance feeling so adrift? As discontented as the balding midlife sad sacks whose cliche dissatisfactions made Updike rich? The women complain of the enervating psychic effects of the professional treadmill as white-collar piecework and describe their dread as they contemplate bleak futures, decade after decade. They imagine unfulfilled. After a lifetime of saying yes to their professional hunger, these are the opportunity seizers, the list makers, the ascendant females, weaned on lean in. They've lost it, like a child losing grasp of a helium balloon. Grief-stricken, they are baffled too, for they have always been propelled by their drive. They were the ones who were supposed to run stuff, who as girls imagined themselves leaving the airport in stylish trench coats, hailing a taxi with one hand while holding their cell in the other. Now there's no vision, one woman said to me. Nothing solid. Said another, limp, desperate, they fantasize about quitting their good jobs and moving home to Michigan. They murmur about purpose, about the concrete satisfactions of baking a loaf of bread or watching a garden grow. One young woman I know dreams of leaving her consulting job, which takes her to Dubai and Prague, to move back home and raise a bunch of kids. Another, an accountant with corner office aspirations, has decided to phone it in for a few years while she figures out what she wants to do. Mostly, though, these women don't bail out. They are too responsible and too devoted to their wavering dreams. They stay put, diligently working, ordering seamless and waiting for something, anything, to reignite them, to convince them that their wanting hasn't abandoned them for good. Any goal would do. One woman told me, a child, a dog, even a refrigerator. People have been motivated by less. Let me stop right now and say, perhaps it's simple. You make your purpose, and sometimes people lose their purpose. I dare say there may be a biological drive that men and women do not share. Women have a finite amount of time to have kids. Men kind of do, but typically don't, which means, in my opinion, there is going to be a difference in the hormonal drives of what causes passions. I'm 33, no family, no kids, and there's nothing stopping me from working until I'm 50 before I decide to do so. But it's no surprise that 30-year-old women are having a midlife crisis. Perhaps it's family. Interestingly, though, like I mentioned in yesterday's video, it was a study about happiness. Men and women are both unhappier after having kids for the first 5 years. And maybe it's just because kids are hard to raise. But this wasn't really about happiness. It was about life satisfaction. For how long after having kids are people unsatisfied? So I'll tell you this. Kids don't seem to be the answer in finding your drive. But if you've lost it at 30, I don't know what it is. But they do say something. They say it's basically about the fact that men are in control. They say that the feminine mystique was prompted by a widespread awakening to the BS promises of domestic happiness manufactured by culture to make female containment look good. Now another BS promise has taken place, and another generation is waking up. The men in charge are still in charge. It is impossible for women to continue to have faith in a vision of their own empowerment when that empowerment is in fact a pose. It is not true that a gleaming kitchen floor is the key to female satisfaction. And bow down B-word is a lie. The myth of female empowerment has always been on a collision course with reality. But until relatively recently, working females took this understanding for granted. We knew that we were tokens. We laughed as we made female anatomy jokes when the bosses weren't listening, for we could count one or two of us in the top tier compared to 10 or 12 of them. Our music was rough and cynical and filled with longing, but millennial women made the mistake of dutifully believing that they were taught what they were taught. They presumed their power. Everything they read or watched, everyone suggested to them that their path ahead was clear. They got more degrees. They entered law in greater numbers. They knew they could support themselves and had no gendered expectations around eventual family. What does it mean to grow up listening to roar when female achievement has flatlined? The wage gap is about the same as it's been for a decade. Let's stop there and talk about the wage gap. The wage gap will always be there. Always. Now, job to job, it's kind of not. The real wage gap is between 3 and 5% for the same job. If a guy is hired to be a teacher and a woman is hired to be a teacher, the guy will likely get 3 to 5% more. And it's typically, as we believe, due to negotiating. Men are assertive, aggressive, and willing to take risks. Women less so. In which case, that gap will persist. But then we also have the actual not job, the apples to oranges wage gap. Every male earner compared to every female earner will likely stay the same. You know why? Because of that curve, because of the greater male variability hypothesis. I'm sorry. The answer to you wanting more money is not to knock down men who are successful. It's just a fact. You will find a bunch of male losers, that's why homeless people tend to be men, and you will find substantially more male geniuses. If you have 1 million geniuses, like literally 1 million, and there's more than that, if we're talking about this curve, maybe there's 30, 40, 50, even 100 million geniuses in the world. Maybe not. There's only around 500,000 notable people on Wikipedia, I think. Let's say you got 500,000 geniuses in this world, and they are more likely to be men by 20%. That means you are going to have 100,000 more, or I'm probably doing the math wrong, but you get the point. Substantially more genius men. Now think about how many Fortune 500 jobs there are. Oh, there's 500 of them. So if you're competing the smaller amount of women versus the greater amount of men, don't be surprised when patriarchy never ends. But that's why they want socialism. The only thing that could really balance this out, force. That's right, cutting down the tall grass, making sure that men who are geniuses can't succeed. Otherwise, you will never find gender parity. It won't work. So perhaps this op-ed is right. It was a lie. You know what I look at? I look at these like action shows and anime and manga and comic books where it shows men and women fighting on equal footing. Like superhero stuff, you know what I mean? And that can make sense in a magical universe where everyone's got magic powers. But it's crazy to me, this idea that men and women will always be considered equal in every capacity. The fact remains, you will be more likely to find an intelligent woman than an intelligent man. That's a fact. If you go out and ask a handful of women versus a handful of men, don't be surprised when the men answer poorly relative to the women. That's because there are more average women than average men. However, so I'll put it this way. Let's say you asked 10 men and 10 women a basic question. When did Christopher Columbus, embark? I know it's a trivia question, but the point is, that genius, those couple of genius guys will tell you the right answer. But so will most of the women, because it's a simple question, or it's a general question. And then there will be more guys who get it wrong, because there are more stupid guys. You see, the point I'm making is, when it comes to basic talent, you will find that there are more women and men, there are more women than men who can solve basic problems. They will then think, hey, we're doing all these managerial jobs. However, leadership roles are fewer and far between. The people who are more likely to break the barrier into the top tier of intellect, genius, ability, talent, physical ability are going to be dudes. And so these women who think they're entering a world where they will compete on equal footing, if you are the best, smartest, most talented female in the world, you're competing with 10 guys, or maybe 2, whatever the proportion might be. The fact is, genius males are going to compete with every other genius and fight and claw their way to the top. And women are facing a bunch of guys, and there are more of them. Guys don't have that same competition amongst each other. So there it is. Perhaps the problem was women were told their whole lives that you could be equal to men. The fact of the matter is, you are more likely to be better than men at the base level. But don't be surprised when your boss is a dude. That's just how things are. You see, even I made mistakes. So they go on to say women enter workplace full of ambition. Yeah, I get it. I'm not going to read through the whole thing. Let me read you their final thoughts, just to be fair. They say, to be clear, this is not about settling, about making peace with the humdrum sexism of traditional workplaces. Rage and revolution are called for, and such upheaval requires more professional investment by more females, not less. Instead, this is about a shift in perspective, an appreciation for imperfect circumstances and unmet yearnings as facts of life, and a willingness to seek gratifications and inspirations outside the boundaries of a job. Dogs are helpful in this regard. So are children and friends and sports and museums and live music and adult activities and activism and charity. The other day I saw a 6-year-old girl wearing a t-shirt that said undefeatable. She was skipping down the street and holding her father's hand. And I thought, that's the problem right there. Surely that girl is as defeatable or as undefeatable as anyone. But that doesn't mean she shouldn't grow up to fight. Well, in the end, I think the problem is we keep telling everybody that you are equal. There is no difference. It's a social construct. It's just not true. Why? Look, men are aggressive. They're more aggressive, and it's likely due to the hormones in their bodies. That's basically what science tells us. Women don't have that. But we keep telling women to be like men. We don't tell men to be like women. We certainly encourage people to be themselves. But right now, what is the predominant message in society? We tell women, you can be the CEO and lead that company. And that's great. They can. And they can fight for that. And if they have the talent and the ability and the drive, they will make it there. But are we seeing an equal message to tell men, you don't have to be? You can raise kids and stay at home? We don't. There is certainly a message there sometimes, but the predominant message is telling women to be more masculine in the traditional roles. You can argue traditional gender roles don't make sense. That's fine. The point is, the traditional gender role for a male is running the company while the woman raises the kids. We are more likely to see women encouraged to take the masculine role than we are to see men to take the feminine role. And there you go. Men can't have kids, by the way. So guys are probably going to do what they can to create something, in their work and their passions. But maybe the ambition collision, Lisa Miller, this article's from a couple years ago, mind you. Maybe the reality is women would be happier finding meaning in other places, like she says at the end. Go do sports, go to museums, go to art, have kids, get a dog. Instead, everyone keeps telling women they have to be the CEOs, but you're competing with substantially more men. So the reality is, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. It matters if you're a CEO. Just because there are more male CEOs doesn't mean there's a problem. It means those are the people who wanted and could do it. They want 50-50 CEOs, men and women. It doesn't make sense. Perhaps the women who became CEOs are those who wanted to and had the ability to do it. And it just so happens there will more likely be more men who do it. There's nothing wrong with that. They want the equality of outcome, but that doesn't mean anything. Are you happy with your life? And if you're not, stop listening to other people and find out what makes you happy. Thanks for hanging out. I will see you all tomorrow at 10 a.m.